Hi guys, this is a review of Lab 15 and Lecture 36, reflection of the anterior abdominal wall and the peritoneal cavity. I hope you guys are doing well. This is hopefully going to be a quick one. So we are looking at the peritoneum for this lab, and the first question that should come to mind is, what is it? It's a single layer of squamous epithelium, aka mesothelium, that forms a serous membrane that covers most of the digestive and reproductive organs. It covers the walls of the abdominal and pelvic cavity, and so our peritoneal cavity would include the abdominal and pelvic cavity overall. Here you can see, a better view, perhaps cross-section of the peritoneal cavity. You can see that the peritoneum is both parietal, lining the walls, and then visceral, lining the organs overall. All right, so pretty straightforward, but the peritoneal cavity does essentially complete coverage of all the organs in the abdominal and pelvic cavity, so it's covering them. And then it's important to note it exists as a potential space, aka peritoneal cavity, formed by the lining of the peritoneums over the organs in the abdominal wall. Forms this potential space, which is the space between organs that are normally in contact with each other. It's full of serous fluid and, importantly, macrophages, but it has an enormous surface area full of macrophages. Surface area means it can absorb fluids into the circulatory system pretty easily. All right, so this peritoneal cavity, just an important note, in males, the peritoneal cavity is closed. In females, the peritoneal cavity is actually open to the outside world as a result of the uterine tube, right? We have, you come in here through the uterine tubes, and you can see the fimbriae, but there is actually a gap right here that opens into the pelvic cavity, aka the peritoneal cavity. All right, and then what's the organization? Well, we already kind of touched on this, which we have our parietal and our visceral peritonia, but our parietal peritoneum covers the abdominal and pelvic walls, and our visceral peritoneum covers the abdominal and pelvic organs. All right, and so we haven't touched on this really in lecture, meaning for this particular lab, the focus is not on the organs, but I think that it is important to go over them because we're going to be talking about them as it pertains to whether they are intraperitoneal, meaning completely covered by the visceral peritoneum, these organs, or they're retroperitoneal, meaning partially covered by the peritoneum, and then their backside is adjacent with the abdominal wall. All right, and so just very quickly, what organs are we dealing with? Well, all of this area is above the thoracic cavity or above, so we're concerned with the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity, which make up our peritoneal cavity. So we have, of course, our friend the liver, which we know does detox and stores glycogen amongst a whole bunch of other things, acts as a blood reservoir. Then we have our friend the stomach, which is for food storage and digestion. It starts to break down food for later absorption. Then we have the spleen adjacent to the stomach. It almost looks like a kidney, but it's superior to our kidneys. It stores and filters blood, right? And you're like, doesn't the kidneys filter blood? Yes, but it's focused on blood cells itself, so eliminating destroyed blood cells, and storing white blood cells for the immune system. So spleen is part of the immune system. Then we have our friend the pancreas right here, just below the stomach, and this releases digestive juices, and it's important for blood sugar regulation as it produces insulin. Then we have the gallbladder, which we know will store and secrete bile, which is important for breakdowns of fats. The digestive juices released by the pancreas are important for protein breakdown. All right, leading off of our stomach, we have the small intestines, and we'll look a little bit more at that in a second, but the small intestine leads into the large intestines. Our small intestines are our main part of our digestion, so nutrient absorption, hormone, it does some hormone production, about like satiety, for instance, and helps with later motility. Our large intestines is mostly doing water reabsorption, and then absorbing vitamins, and then propelling and forming feces. It also protects from infection. The large intestine ends in the rectum and the anus overall. All right, so taking just a quick look more at the small intestine and the large intestine, so we have our friend the stomach. We have the pylorus with the pyloric sphincter between it and the duodenum. The duodenum will lead into the jejunum, which I'm mispronouncing. That will connect to the ileum, which leads into the large intestines, and where it does that is called the cecum. Then we have our large intestine with the ascending colon. Then we have our transverse colon, then our descending colon, then our sigmoid colon. It kind of looks like some sort of sigmoidal shape, and then our rectum and anal canal, and then on our cecum, where the small intestine meets the large intestine, we also have the appendix. All right, so we got all these different organs. If we're talking about the organs in the peritoneal cavity, that we started to allude to this, we have the intraperitoneal organs, which we started completely covered by visceral peritoneum. This would be the stomach, the first part of the duodenum, the jejunum, the ileum, the transverse colon, the sigmoid colon, the liver, and the spleen. Are you expected to remember that right now? No, but you can see the intraperitoneal part is more anterior towards the front of the body. The retroperitoneal, further back, is only partially covered by peritoneum, our kidneys, ureters, supraadrenal glands on top of the kidneys, and then our rectum. But we actually have a nice mnemonic to remember the retroperitoneal. We also have the infraperitoneal down here, which are going to be the organs in the pelvic region. And so for our retroperitoneal, we have SAD puckers, right? So these are only partially covered by peritoneum. SAD being our suprarenal, aka adrenal glands on top of our friends the kidneys. You can see them right here. Then we have our aorta and inferior vena cava for A. Our duodenum, specifically the second and third segments of it. So that would be like right around here. And then our pancreas right here. Our ureters, which are the tubes coming off of our kidneys, going down to the bladder. Then the ascending and descending, so ascending part of the colon, descending part of the colon, our friends the kidneys, and then our esophagus, and then our rectum. All right, so that's not too bad, hopefully, but there's a decent amount there. And these are slides that I added because it wasn't in the lab guide overall. All right, so special structures formed by the peritoneum. So we know the peritoneum is simple squamous single layer, but we'll actually have the simple single layer fold back on itself and form double layers. And so our first special structure is the mesentery. And so this is the special structure, and then the other ones are basically versions of that, or so omentum is a version of mesentery, and the ligaments are specific parts of mesentery. If you're like, oh, I'm pointing to that piece of mesentery, that's a ligament. I'm pointing to that piece of omentum, which is a form of mesentery, pointing to that piece of omentum, that's a ligament. All right, so mesentery is a double layer of peritoneum from the body wall specifically to enclose and suspend organs in the peritoneal cavity. You can see it here, body wall around an organ, and that is being enclosed, connected to the body wall. All right, examples are the quote-unquote mesentery itself, the transverse colon, the mesoappendix, and the sigmoid mesocolon. So importantly, when you see meso in front of that, that should make you think mesentery, because really that's exactly what that means. The mesocolon is not a separate colon, it's just the mesentery, this double layer of peritoneum that's connecting the colon to the abdominal wall. All right, so this mesentery right here, or the quote-unquote mesentery, is what we would call the this part right here, which you can see is connecting the small intestines to the abdominal wall. But again, mesentery as a general word is just this double layer of connective tissue. And then we have mesentery, we can see right here, this is the sigmoid colon, so this is the sigmoid mesocolon, and then the appendix should be like down here, so you have the mesoappendix, the mesentery connecting the appendix to the abdominal wall, and then we have our friend the transverse colon, that's going to have mesentery attaching that to the wall behind it. All right, then we have a form of mesentery called omentum, and so this is a double layer fold, aka a mesentery, that suspends the stomach specifically in the first part of the duodenum to another abdominal organ. So specifically we have the greater omentum and the lesser omentum, but this is associated with the stomach and the first part of the duodenum to the transverse colon in the case of the greater omentum, which is right here. All right, so the transverse colon you can start to see, and it's connecting the greater curvature of the stomach, and then you can also see the first part of the duodenum here, and that's the greater omentum is connecting the greater curvature of the stomach and the duodenum to the transverse colon, which you can see below it. And specifically, as we'll see in a minute, this overhangs the rest of the large intestines and small intestines. It's kind of like a flap that keeps things in place. Then we have the lesser omentum, which is right here, and it's connecting the lesser curvature of the stomach, right there, and the first part of the duodenum, right there, to the liver, which is right here. Right, this is the liver. Okay, so just a quick note on the stomach. So we have different parts of the stomach. This is the lesser curvature. This is the greater curvature. The top of it's the fundus. We have the esophagus, the cardiac sphincter. We have the pylorus and the pyloric sphincter. And then we have the first part of the small intestines, the duodenum. All right, so ligaments are specifically just sectional regions of mesentery or omentum. And we have a number of different examples, but the lesser omentum is made up of the hepatoduodenal ligament, and the hepatogastric. Gastric is referring to stomach. So all of our ligaments, which are just, again, connecting organ to either another organ or organ to body wall, ligaments are just sections of mesentery or omentum. These are named after what they connect. So if you look at the lesser omentum again, right, we have the hepatoduodenal ligament. So this is the hepatum, right, the liver, and this is the duodenum. Then we have the gastrohepatic ligament. This is the gastro, right, the stomach, and this is the hepato, the liver. Right, so not too bad. Other examples: splenorenal ligament, falciform ligament, and coronary ligament. These are all associated with the liver, except for gastrosplenic. So this is a little bit of a typo. Should be these the bottom three. Gastrosplenic is between the stomach and the spleen. And you're like, where's the spleen again? The spleen is right here. Kind of looks like a kidney, but it's above the kidneys. Right, here's a kidney over here. All right, and we have the gastrosplenic would be right here, and then falciform in particular is going to divide the liver into two and connect it to the abdominal wall in the back, and then the coronary ligament is going to connect the liver to the diaphragm. All right, so then our final structure that's special is our peritoneal folds. This is basically a reflection of the peritoneum when it overlies the structure associated with the abdominal wall. It results in a defined border over structure. So the three that we have the median umbilical fold, the medial umbilical fold, and the lateral umbilical fold. All right, so medial umbilical fold, or excuse me, ligament, which is made of peritoneum, so you could say fold, and then as it extends outwards, we're looking at a cross section, medial umbilical ligament, and then lateral umbilical ligament. All right, let's just take a quick look at the software so we can see what we can in the abdominal region. So you're like, that looks nothing like what we would expect, right? Where are the intestines? Well, here we have the anterolateral part of the peritoneum, so I'm just going to hide that. And then we have the diaphragmic part of the peritoneum. Hide that, so that's on the underside of the diaphragm. Here we have our friend, the liver. Then you can see we have the flap from the greater omentum. So I'm going to go ahead and hide that. I'm going to hide the liver. Okay, then you can see we have our friend, the stomach. All right, just different layers of the stomach. All right, and so you can hide that. All right, and we see we have the small intestine, the duodenum, right here. We have the pancreas, right there. We have our first kidney, our second kidney. We have the adrenal glands on top of the kidney. We do not have, in this particular view, the spleen, unfortunately, but you can see we have the gallbladder right there. All right, we can see that it's draining into the small intestines. All right, hepatogastric ligament. Here we have the transverse colon. And we have our duodenum is going into our jejunum, which is going to go into the ileum. And then the ileum is going to go into the cecum, the first part of our ascending large intestine. Then we have our friend, the appendix, right there. All right, we already got rid of the transverse colon, but the ascending colon goes into the transverse colon. Then we have the descending colon, we have the sigmoid colon, and then that's going to go back to the rectum. All right, rectum, and then anus. Okay, so let's see if we can hide some of these really quickly. All right, and then here we just have some mesentery attaching the abdominal wall, mesentery attaching small intestines to the abdominal wall. All right, we can see our ureters as well. And then we have our friend, the bladder, which the ureters are. The uterus should be feeding into the bladder, which you can see right there. All right, so not too bad. We're missing the spleen, but we can start to see some of it. Not the best for seeing all of the peritoneum, but you can do some of it. All right, so going back to the peritoneal folds, again, this is a reflection of the peritoneum when it overlies a structure associated with the abdominal wall. So can you identify the peritoneal folds on the internal surface of the reflected interior abdominal wall? So this is a cross section. You can see our belly button here. So this is a cross section, frontal cross section of the abdominal wall, and see we have our medial umbilical fold, and lateral umbilical fold right there. Not too bad. All right, greater omentum, we said, is from the greater curvature of the stomach to the transverse colon, and it also includes the first part of the duodenum, and you can see that it is in fact inserting upon the transverse colon. We also have the greater omentum flap, and that's exactly what we said. The functions of the greater omentum are to basically contains a lot of macrophages. The milky white spots that we'll see are full of macrophages. It supports the organs. It does have vessels inside of blood vessels. You can see it's kind of fatty, so fat deposits, and then it will help limit the spread of infection as a result of the white spots, the abundance of macrophages. All right, so then if we take a look at the side view of the peritoneal cavity, what are the peritoneal and visceral structures you can identify in this median sagittal image? Well, specifically, we see the parietal peritoneum, which is lining the cavity of the abdominal wall, and then into the pelvic cavity down here. When it goes around the organs, we have the visceral peritoneum when it's going around the organs. And then we have the division of the peritoneal cavity into actually two sacs. There's the lesser sac, which is behind the stomach and in front of the pancreas. And then we have the greater sac, which is pretty much everything else, but more on that right now. So the peritoneum is broken up into the greater sac and lesser sac. The greater sac actually has two compartments separated by the transverse colon. So the supracolic and infracolic, and the supracolic region is going to be the liver, stomach, and spleen, and then the infracolic region of the greater sac is going to be the area below the transverse colon, the jejunum, ileum, and then the entire large intestine. All right, so you can see that here. So including the transverse colon right here. You have the transverse mesocolon, which is just mesentery attaching the transverse colon to the abdominal wall. You can see we have the supracolic compartment above, which has our liver and stomach and spleen. And then the infracolic compartment of the greater sac is going to have everything below that. And you can see that here. Then we have the lesser sac, which we said is right here behind the stomach. The boundaries superiorly are the coronary ligament of the liver, which connects the liver to the diaphragm. Then you have on the left-hand side of the body the gastrophrenic, splenorenal, and gastrosplenic ligaments. Inferiorly below, you have the transverse mesocolon. All right, the greater omentum. And inferiorly, the transverse colon. All right, and then posteriorly, the posterior abdominal wall, and then retroperitoneal structures, pancreas, left adrenal gland, and left kidney, and then in the front, the lesser omentum, the hepatoduodenal and hepatogastric ligaments, and then the posterior part of the stomach. All right, so lesser omentum right here. So just a tiny bit more on this. Since we have these two sacs, there is a communication between the two. In particular, the lesser and greater sacs, meet through the epiloic foramen, which you can see here. It's just below the stomach. Interiorly, it's bound by the hepatoduodenal ligament. Superiorly, the conduit lobe of the liver. Inferiorly, the first part of the duodenum, and then posteriorly, the vena cava and right cruce of the diaphragm. All right, so not too bad. Can you discuss the difference between infraperitoneal and retroperitoneal organs? Well, we've already touched on this, but intraperitoneal, again, just means the organ is completely surrounded by peritoneum. Retroperitoneal means it's only partially surrounded by peritoneum. We said our retroperitoneal organs are our sad pucker mnemonic. What was it? Sad sac. Sad pucker for adrenal glands, suprarenal, adrenal glands, aorta, duodenum, second, third parts, pancreas, uterus, colon, kidneys, esophagus, rectum. And intraperitoneal is everything in the front right here. Stomach, first part of duodenum, jejunum, ileum, transverse colon, sigmoid colon, liver, and spleen. All right, not too bad. We're getting closer to done. What structure is depicted by the arrows? We have the lesser omentum, and we have our two ligaments, the hepatoduodenal ligament and the gastrohepatic ligament, which make up the lesser omentum. What structure is posterior to this lesser omentum? Well, we have our friend the epiloic foramen, and then we have the pancreas. Okay, and here, what hole did the needle pass through? This is the needle. This would be the epiloic foramen. Where's the tip located? Well, it depends on what you mean by the tip, but here it's in the lesser sac, here it's in the greater sac. What retroperitoneal organ can you identify? Well, sad pucker, so P in pucker is our friend the pancreas. Okay, what structures and spaces can you identify in this drawing? So it's a nice cross section, bilateral. We have our two kidneys right here, and then we have our adrenal glands on top of them, aka the suprarenal glands, adrenal glands. We have our friend the stomach, we have our spleen, we have the splenorenal ligament, which is connecting the renals, the kidneys, to the spleen. We have our friend the liver, we have the falciform ligament connecting the liver to the abdominal wall. Then we have the hepatoduodenal ligament connecting the liver, hepatum, to the duodenum, which we can't really see here. Then we have the epiloic foramen, and that means that this is the lesser sac, and out here is the greater sac. All right, so not too bad. What structures are retroperitoneal versus infraperitoneal? We keep going back to this, but retroperitoneal are sad puckers, the adrenal glands on top of our friend the kidney, or aorta, which you can kind of see here, and then duodenum, the second and third parts, which would be these guys, right? This would be the first part. And then the pancreas right here, our friend the uterus, which are descending from our kidneys into the bladder. Then our ascending and descending colon, which we can't see in this image, our friend the kidneys, and then the esophagus, which is going to end in the stomach, so it's superior to this view, and then the rectum. All right, can you discuss the duodenum folds and their clinical significance? Well, the clinical significance is a potential site of hernia. Basically, the folds are this region right here. We have the superior duodenal fold and the inferior duodenal fold, and together they make the peritoneal recess, where the peritoneum folds back on itself. But specifically, the recess is generally associated when you have something going from retroperitoneal to intraperitoneal. All right, so we have the duodenum going from retroperitoneal to intraperitoneal. And as a result, we have the duodenal folds, superior and inferior duodenal folds, lining the duodenal fossa, making up the peritoneal recess right there. All right, or all three of these are peritoneal recess: superior duodenal fossa, paraduodenal fossa, inferior duodenal fossa. Okay, can you discuss the recess associated with the sigmoid colon and cecum? Well, we know the cecum is where the small intestine meets the large intestine, so the first part of the small intestine, or large intestine, excuse me. Below that, we have the rectocecal recess, which is located right here. Then we have the sigmoid colon, which we know is right here, and again, cecum is right here, and the appendix is right below it. Sigmoid colon is right here, and so below that, we have the intersigmoid recess, and you can see the sigmoid mesocolon, aka sigmoid mesentery, is helping form that recess. Generally, peritoneal recesses are pouches formed by folds of the peritoneum, and generally, as we said, associated with structures going from retroperitoneal to peritoneal, to intraperitoneal, from back to front. All right, what structure has been from partially covered to fully covered by the peritoneum? What has been removed from this image? Well, we're missing the large and small intestines. Can you identify the positions of the pericolic gutters? Yes, they are located right here, and they are spaced between the ascending and descending colon and the abdominal wall. It allows fluids to flow from the abdomen down to the pelvic cavity. All right, can you conceptualize the superior and inferior recesses of the lesser peritoneal sac? Well, here's the lesser peritoneal sac. Superior recesses are going to be up here, inferior down here. This wasn't really mentioned in lecture, and they said that they would expand on it in the future, so we look forward to that. All right, this wasn't from the lab slides, but I wanted to add this. The sensory innervation of the peritoneum, the parietal peritoneum, again, that's here along the walls of the cavity, are sensitive to touch, pain, and temperature. They're provided by the intercostal, lumbar, and sacral nerves. Sensory innervation to the peritoneal surface of the thoracic diaphragm is provided by the intercostal nerves and the phrenic nerves. And so basically, here we can see T6 through L3 is helping to innervate the parietal peritoneum. And again, touch, pain, and temperature. The visceral peritoneum, which again, visceral means peritoneum lining the organs. It's insensitive to mechanical sensations such as touch and temperature. However, it is sensitive to stretch. And so we're going to talk more about this in the future, but you can see that we also have ganglia, dorsal root ganglia, dorsal rami coming and innervating the visceral peritoneum. All right, and then in terms of abdominal quadrants and regions, in our class, we're going to break the abdominal regions of the abdomen into 4 with a transumbilical plane, so cutting through the belly button, and then a median plane going down from the center of the xiphoid process. And that gives us the right upper quadrant, left upper quadrant, lower left quadrant, right lower quadrant. And then we have our, used in clinics, we have 9 regions. First is from our midclavicular plane, so right through the clavicle, center of the clavicle. Then our second planes are the subcostal planes, right at the very edge of our coastal margin on rib 10. And then we have the tubular plane right here. And overall, we get a total of 9 regions. In the center, we have the epigastric region with our friend the stomach. We have the left hypochondrium, the right hypochondrium, the left flank, the right flank, the belly button region, the umbilical region. Then we have the pubic region, and then we have the left groin and right groin. All right, so that brings us to the end. We did have a surgical case. So Mike is a 33-year-old male presenting to our rural hospital 2 days after car crash. After being discharged, the patient returned to the emergency room with concerns of black tarry stools and dizziness. The patient is hypotensive on exam and had decreased hematocrit on his blood cells, so his red blood cells are down, complete blood cell count. After the patient was given IV fluid, GI was consulted, and upper GI endoscopy was unable to be obtained, and as a result, we performed an exploratory laparotomy to identify the sources of bleeding. So what anatomical landmarks help differentiate upper GI bleeds from lower GI bleeds? The sensory ligament of the duodenum, aka the ligament of Treitz, which is not mentioned in the lecture. It marks the division between the duodenum and the jejunum, which distinguishes the upper and lower GI tracts, as the duodenum goes to the second part of the small intestines, the jejunum, and is clinically relevant to determine the source of bleeding. What is the name of the ligament that separates the liver into left and right lobes? That's the falciform. And then what organ lies posterior to the lesser peritoneal sac? It is our friend, the pancreas. All right, so that's it. Just a reminder, this is tough stuff, so keep up the good work, be kind to yourself, and spend some time doing things that make you happy. All right, bye guys, good job.